You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the 2013 movie Star Trek Into Darkness. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, we've got some more listener feedback, so we'll be sharing that at the end of the show, so stick around to hear that. And remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on our X, where we're at SQPN, and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And be sure to leave us comments wherever you find us, because that's one place where we get lots of your feedback, and we really do appreciate getting that. And with that, Jimmy, could you give us a recap of Star Trek Into Darkness?
This week, Kirk and the gang are on a primitive planet where a volcano is about to end its primitive civilization. For no clear reason, Kirk and McCoy are running from the primitives. Meanwhile, Spock is trying to get a cold fusion device into the volcano to freeze it and stop it from erupting, even though that's not what cold fusion devices do. Things go bad, and Spock is going to die in the volcano, but Kirk breaks the Prime Directive by letting the primitive culture see the Enterprise, and they save Spock. After they get back, Admiral Pike tells Kirk he's not ready for command, and they're taking the Enterprise away from him. However, an emergency happens when a man named John Harrison stages a 9/11-style attack on London and kills many. In response, Starfleet calls a meeting of captains and first officers, and Harrison then attacks this meeting as well, killing Admiral Pike. He then transwarp beams himself to Kronos. Admiral Marcus sends Kirk with a bunch of fancy torpedoes to go wipe him out from orbit. But Kirk listens to his crew for once and goes down to get Harrison instead. Turns out Harrison is a super warrior who kills a whole squad of Klingons, and when he learns that there are 72 torpedoes, he suddenly surrenders himself into Kirk's custody. Back aboard the Enterprise, Harrison indicates that there is a mysterious plot afoot, and he gives Kirk two clues, a set of coordinates near Jupiter and the idea of opening one of the torpedoes. Kirk has Scotty investigate the coordinates near Jupiter, and he has Dr. McCoy and Carol Marcus open a torpedo. They discover that it contains a 300-year-old man in cryonic suspension. Harrison then reveals that he's really Khan Noonien Singh, and the torpedoes are filled with his crew of augments. Admiral Marcus found Khan, thawed him, and used him to design weapons for the Federation, but Khan rebelled and escaped. Admiral Marcus now shows up and plans to kill everyone on the Enterprise except his daughter Carol, whom he beams away. He disables the Enterprise, but before the Badmiral can destroy it, Scotty disables the ship's weapons. Kirk now allies with Khan, because of course he does. The two space jump over to Marcus's ship, where Khan kills Marcus by crushing his skull. Meanwhile, Spock, in command of Enterprise, gets on FaceTime with the original Spock and talks to him about how they defeated the original Khan. New Khan then gets on FaceTime with Spock and demands the torpedoes with his crew. Khan beams Kirk, Scotty, and Carol back to the Enterprise and beams over the torpedoes. But Spock had McCoy take Khan's crew out of them, and he detonates the torpedoes aboard Khan's ship. Both ships are now fallen out of Earth orbit, because of course they are. Kirk exposes himself to fatal radiation to restart Enterprise's warp core so it can stop falling, and Khan's ship falls out of orbit and crashes into Starfleet headquarters. Spock witnesses Kirk's death from radiation. He then beams down to catch Khan, who survived his ship's crash. McCoy realizes there's a way to save Kirk using Khan's blood, so Uhura also beams down and stops Spock from killing him. In the end, Khan is returned to the deep freeze, Kirk makes a speech to the Academy, and the Enterprise sets off for the first 5-year mission ever. The end.
I have so much to say. But first, I'll let you say your first bit. Father Tyler, what do you think of this one?
You know, I remember enjoying it when I first watched it, I guess, in 2013. But one thing I noticed as I was watching it to prepare for this podcast is I'm not sure I've even rewatched it maybe just once since then. And, in the end, I'd say my perspective now is it's okay, not spectacular, but not terrible. I appreciated, the reboots, the Abrams movies. I guess I appreciate that they're not just a regular reboot in the sense of of pretending like the original series and everything after it never happened. I like the alternate timeline take on things, but with that, I wasn't so crazy about rehashing Khan and giving a new way of seeing him. I would have loved to see a new villain or someone who maybe had a much smaller role in the original series come about here. I did like some of the scenes of 23rd century Earth that we got to see, and I thought the ship details and some of the special effects were very good. But yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts there.
Jimmy, how about you?
Well, I know a lot of fans, long-term fans, really hated this when it came out because it retreaded the Khan material, and I didn't hate it for that reason. I can see an alternate version of Khan. That's fine with me. But Benedict Cumberbatch is just all wrong to play Khan. This is just not as entertaining as Ricardo Montalban being Khan. It is a big step down in terms of movie entertainment value. Khan had been established from his first appearance as this super confident, flamboyant, macho guy strutting around, and that is just not Benedict Cumberbatch's character. He's just all wrong for this part. So I thought, and then there's all kinds of stupid stuff in it, like a cold fusion device to freeze volcanoes.
Yes.
Okay. What cold fusion is, for people who may not be aware, is fusion that occurs at least approximating room temperature. So it's actually a way to generate heat. You just don't need super high temperatures in order to do it. You can do it at colder temperatures that approximate room temperature, but it's still a way to generate heat. And they're using fire to put out a volcano.
So bad.
Yeah. So, but that's a minor point. That's just in the forgettable opening sequence. Overall, this is not real Star Trek. This is Star Wars with a Star Trek skin on it, and nothing. Put me. Even when I saw it in the theaters, I said that to myself. Nothing convinced me of that more than the space jump that Khan and Kirk do, where they leap between spaceships and they're flying through this incredibly dense field of debris and having to move around stuff. And this is two Jedi's force jumping.
Yeah.
This is not really Star Trek.
If you think about it, this is just before he's made The Force Awakens, which is what he really wanted to do with Star Wars. He was really a Star Wars fan. I mean, he admitted that. So Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan was the worst kept secret in movie history. The idea ahead of they tried to keep it down low so that it was John Harrison until they had the big reveal. But of course, everyone before the movie even came out knew Cumberbatch was Khan. So terrible idea. So
I felt bad that Mickey from Doctor Who turned out to be Mickey and not Ricky in this one.
I know. Yeah, I wanted to talk about Mickey in a second because it's fun. There's a couple of Doctor Who folks in this, I think. As usual, J.J. Abrams plays fast and loose with distances and times. He did that in Star Wars. It does that here. He doesn't in his movies. I don't understand it. It drives me crazy. It takes no time to go anywhere in his sci-fi universes. I don't even know why we need ships because we could just transport beam everywhere. Shooting torpedoes from the neutral zone, like all this, like just drives me crazy. Like because it's not just being a nitpicky like Star Trek nerd. It undermines the whole genre. The genre is science fiction. It's science fiction, just like the cold fusion thing. Take a minute to come up with a different name, but don't just slap a known thing on it and say, "Oh, it's good enough."
Just call it a cryo bomb and it'll work.
Yeah. It's sloppy and it drives me crazy. The plot is just a messy amalgamation of bits and pieces of Star Trek lore from all over the place. Khan, Section 31,
Tribbles.
Pike. What's that?
Tribbles. Yeah.
Tribbles, Carol Marcus. So we have all of these bits and pieces of from all over the place.
Okay, in defense of the producers, though, Carol Marcus was hot.
Yes, and then of course they have
her in this at all.
They did have to throw in the scenes of Kirk with the twin Cations and then Carol getting changed for some reason. Not sure why she was getting changed for Kirk, but there we are. So, and I was trying to think about. I liked this movie when it first came out. And I think you both have said similar things. Like there was things I liked about it, but I like it less now, and I think it's because at the time it was the only Star Trek we had. Apart from the stuff that had already been made, but it was the only new Star Trek. But now we've got Strange New Worlds, and we've had Prodigy and Lower Decks, and we've had Discovery, but there's other stuff too. And it's like, oh, this is what modern, like Strange New Worlds is what modern Star Trek could be reimagined, as opposed to what we got here, which is, I don't know. I just, there's so many, and I will talk about it, but it's not terrible, but it doesn't bear up. And like you, Father, I think I've seen this once since the first time. I mean, I actually own it on DVD. I bought the DVD back in the day, but I don't, actually I don't really watch DVDs all that often anymore. I watch this on streaming because that's what I have. It's easier. But yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So we do have this Indiana Jones opening where they're running through the forest. This in media res thing that a lot of movies like to do. They start in the middle of action. And Kirk and McCoy are supposed to be in disguise to prevent violation of the Prime Directive. It's kind of, kind of a thin layer, a thin story to build off of. One thing I did like, though, was the idea of hiding the Enterprise under the ocean. Yeah. Whether it's practical or to the mission or not, I'm not sure why you couldn't just be in orbit like usual, but just the idea that this huge ship is sort of like a UAP. It's trans medium, and so that was kind of a fun little reveal. I kind of did like that. But we laid this opening sequence lays the seed of this idea of being willing to sacrifice your life for the sake of everyone else. In Spock's case here, to preserve the Prime Directive. And of course, he uses the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. That's the classic phrase that we got in Wrath of Khan. But they're misdirecting us because, of course, in this movie, it's not Spock who's going to sacrifice his life. It'll be Kirk for the sake of others. But we're kind of having this misdirection at the beginning, like, oh, Spock almost loses his life. Like, remember that time in Wrath of Khan?
Like in Kobayashi Maru at the beginning of that movie, where they deliberately kill Spock off in the first few scenes so that they can get us past that and have us not being as suspicious for the rest of the movie.
Right. We get that classic line from Kirk, "Aren't you dead?"
Yeah, because originally they were concerned that word that Spock dies in this movie was going to leak, and so they wanted to have a fake out death at the beginning of the movie so that people could dismiss that. Okay, I guess he didn't die, and then move on.
Yes, and maybe that's what they were doing here too. I don't know. So Kirk violates the Prime Directive, gives the native species a new religion, which they kind of leave that as a joke, and then gets in trouble for saving people. And this is the issue with the Prime Directive, right? Where we have this rule where it's better to let an entire civilization die than to potentially expose them to knowledge of aliens.
It's very Vietnam. We had to burn the village we had to destroy the village to save it.
Yeah. yes. And I know we've talked about the morality of the Prime Directive before, but this is one of the, again, one of those cases where Starfleet and the Federation, I think, are wrong. Like we have, if you've got a chance to save people's lives, you save their lives and deal with the aftermath as best you can. But I did like, you did mention that Mickey Smith of Doctor Who the first season of the modern Who, is his Lieutenant Thomas Harewood, who's recruited by Khan. This was actually a pretty good sequence because without saying anything, it's subtle. Without having to tell us, bangs over the head, we get the idea without dialogue that here's a Starfleet lieutenant whose daughter is ill with some sort of sickness that even Federation technology of the 23rd century can't cure. and Khan comes along with his miracle blood to offer to save her if Harewood will basically become a suicide bomber in what will turn out to be a Section 31 facility, but is disguised as a Federation archive buried under London.
And it's extra disguised because everyone there is wearing Imperial trooper or Imperial officer uniforms.
Gotta say, don't like the uniforms that we see in a lot of the Earth-based stuff. Like the shipboard uniforms are fine, but the with the weird peaked caps and the just like, no, Star Trek doesn't have peaked cap uniforms, and just no, don't do that.
By the way, Father, and any listeners who may not be aware, so in the 2005 revival of Doctor Who, they introduced this character named Mickey Smith, who was the boyfriend of Rose Tyler, the new Doctor's first companion. And he was, as he's portrayed in season 1 of Doctor Who, of the 2005 revival, he's a bumbler. He's a bumbler. He is not a heroic character. He's kind of whiny. He's a tie to Rose's past life that she needs to kind of shake free of in order to adventure with the Doctor. And even though she does care about him, he's largely, I mean, he's a Neelix, to put it in Star Trek terms.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the first season, Mickey is begun to redeem himself. He's started to at least help and contribute to plots, and he's in the season finale, he helps Rose get back to the Doctor to save the universe and stuff like that. And then in later seasons, they introduce a parallel world where the same actor plays a parallel character named Ricky. And Ricky is an action hero. Yeah. He's the opposite of Mickey. And so here, and ultimately that's the character arc that they have for Mickey. He becomes an action hero, which is a great redemption for him. But here we're dealing with a definite Mickey.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. He's a Mickey. So Kirk continues to play fast and loose with all the rules. And he gets punished for it for a minute, and then, exigencies of the crisis require him to come back. But I think it brings me back to one of my fundamental issues with the conception of the first Star Trek J.J. Abrams movie, which was, we're pulling this kid out of the academy and putting him in command of a starship. Well, what do you expect is going to happen?
Exactly.
He's going to break all the rules. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing.
I heard someone summarize what happened in the first movie as Kirk essentially makes the argument, hey, my dad's name was Halsey. I should be the admiral of the fleet. Right. It's Nimitz's kid. Yeah, it's so I think it fundamentally undermines the believability and the enjoyment of the story to have this. This isn't like the original James Kirk was kind of a cowboy, from the original series, right. but he was much
still
more professional.
But he was right, and he had, he sometimes bent the rules when necessary. So did Picard, definitely. So did Sisko. He broke the rules at times. But this is just like, he's just like petulant. He's just doing things because he feels like it, just because it's the easiest way to get things done, and it just doesn't feel like Kirk to me. And that's fundamentally, I think, the issue with this version of Kirk. I don't like it. So he wants to get the first 5-year mission for the Enterprise. Again, Jimmy, like as you said, no one's ever did 5-year missions before. And the idea that, we're out there and we're not coming back is kind of dumb, because the Enterprise even in the original series was not like out there, way out, and didn't come back for 5 years. So I never quite understood what they were trying to do with the idea of the 5-year mission.
Especially in a J.J. Abrams movie where distance doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, anybody want to go to the edge of the galaxy for the weekend? And yes, in the original series, they kind of did that at times. They went to the edge of the galaxy and that sort of thing. But over time, in Star Trek canon, we've established it takes longer to get places. But Pike says to Kirk that Kirk thinks he's infallible, that rules are for other people, using blind luck to justify playing God. And Kirk says, "Well, it's worked out so far, hasn't it?" And it's kind of like, "No, dude, you're not getting it. You're acting like a young, like dumb kid who thinks he's immortal, like a teenager." It's just kind of annoying and frustrating.
Now, to be fair to the producers, this was a theme in the original Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, that you reprogrammed the Kobayashi Maru. You don't think rules apply to you. You think you can cheat death. And Kirk acknowledges. He says, "Yeah, I'll cheat. I don't want to die. I don't want anyone under my command to die. I'll cheat."
Right.
So I think that what they're doing here is they're trying to play that same theme in another key. The problem is that was a mature Kirk in Star Trek II, who we had a long history of seeing acting professional and only breaking the rules on occasion, as opposed to it being the one note on the keyboard this character keeps hitting.
Right. I think that's the difference is the lack of subtlety in the way that they're writing it. This is young, impulsive Kirk who just doesn't want to play by the rules, doesn't want to obey the rules. And yes, by the end of this movie, he realizes why some rules are there and why you can't, cheat the rules all the time and that sort of thing. I get that, but man, it is, like you said, it is the one note they keep playing, especially at this part of the movie.
And this is maybe something that highlights too something that's been said in other contexts, and that is that Star Trek does a lot better with TV series, several episodes to develop something rather than the 2-hour movies, because the multiple characters, the getting to know them, getting in depth with and letting those characters develop is part of the secret sauce, if you will, that often goes into really making Star Trek work. And that's probably why some of the series are so much better after you get that first season out of the way too. That the writers are trying to figure things out. The characters are not really set in some ways yet. And so here we have, these movies that are building in some ways off of what the original series did with these characters and the other movies and such. But in other ways are starting very much from scratch because, again, of the alternate timeline and the earlier time setting and everything for all of these.
Yeah, there's a reason why most fans say the best Star Trek movie is one that's nearly 40 years old or over 40 years old at this point.
Or it's not Star Trek at all. It's Galaxy Quest.
That one too. Yes, it's true. Right. But for ones that are strictly meant to be Star Trek, Wrath of Khan, and then you I guess if you were to rank them, Voyage Home, Search for Whales, and maybe
no. There are differences of opinion. Some people,
I know, but
prefer Star Trek 2. Some people prefer Star Trek 4. I prefer Star Trek 6. But
right, but
movies.
Right, but they're all the older movies, and I was just thinking of the polls that are out there. When you poll fans, they usually put those three definitely in the top. But whatever order they choose them, but anything made next gen and these movies, they don't stack up, and I think it is because of that. Father, you're right. Star Trek in its DNA requires time to develop the stories. It's not flash bang like Star Wars. Star Wars is really good on the big screen. Usually, it's at least its DNA is more big screen, where Star Trek's DNA is more small screen in time. So I agree with that. So you have Spock in this one, and I generally like Zach Quinto's Spock.
I've been reassessing it a bit because I'm not a huge fan of the J.J. Abrams movies, and one of the things that leapt out to me in rewatching this is Zachary Quinto has a really high-pitched voice that doesn't sound like Spock to me. I think the TV Spock that they have on Strange New Worlds is
Ethan Peck.
Ethan Peck is doing a better job.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's another thing is that contrast. Now that we have another Spock, apart from Leonard Nimoy, I think it highlights the difference, especially the difference in the way they play this one. He's much more emotional. The Ethan Peck Spock, there's emotion there, but it's subtler, like the original Spock, who had emotion, but it wasn't like, at one point, and we have this whole relationship with the Uhura thing,
which I don't mind. I think that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's played fun, like Uhura's being mad at Spock while they're flying down.
Are you two fighting? What is that even like? That was a great line.
That was a great line. I agree.
And they hinted a romance between Spock and Uhura in the original series. They never pay it off, but they do hint at it.
Sure.
I love Kirk's being uncomfortable as he's flying the shuttle with them kind of bickering behind him. And he's like, can we focus on the mission here? That was good. But he says to Uhura at some point about, she calls him unfeeling, and he says, I choose not to feel based on what I felt during the destruction of Vulcan. Like he's really decided to close himself off to emotions much more so than before, which is because, again, Spock has never been unfeeling. If you watch the original series, you see Spock has emotions all over the place. He's amusement, he's angry, whatever.
He touches that Chinese money plant that's been spray painted blue and smiles in the pilot.
That's right. So, yeah.
And, the whole idea of him being so emotionally overwhelmed at the destruction of Vulcan and using that as a sort of reason not to get very emotional in the future is actually very consistent with the whole Vulcan approach to emotion. Because we're told at different times that primitive Vulcans were extremely emotional. And that's where the discipline of logic and everything came in as a way to sort of control that and to suppress those emotions.
It also fits with human psychology. If something really painful happens to someone,
right,
it's like, okay, I can't ever let myself get in that position again. That may be part of why I didn't end up, as much as I wanted to remarry after I became a widower. That may be part of why I didn't. It just hurts so much to, at a young age, to lose a spouse that it's like, I just can't do that again.
Yeah. So it's not weird for Spock to feel that way. And I kind of like that they explore that a little bit in this one. And then we get a chance to see him kind of say something about that. Also, once again, Spock is right. When Admiral Marcus sends the Enterprise on this very strange mission to the neutral zone to shoot, let's stop right there. Why did they put the 72 people in the torpedoes? I didn't understand what the point of that was.
I know this was really this. I was going to bring this up because this is a significant problem in the script writing. So originally they weren't in the torpedoes. Originally the torpedoes were weapons, and it was Khan who put the augments into the torpedoes, that can still somehow function as torpedoes. Well, okay. The question then becomes, did Admiral Marcus know that that's what Khan had done? If he knew, then it makes no sense for Marcus to order Kirk to fire augments at Kronos. On the other hand, if he didn't know, then it would make sense, for at least some kind of sense, to fire these torpedoes at Kronos to start the war that Admiral Marcus wants. But later, Marcus is talking as if he knew that Khan had put the augments into the torpedoes. And so who knew what? What did the president, to quote Howard Baker, what did the president know and when did he know it?
Yep.
This is not clearly communicated and doesn't appear to make sense.
Right.
Right. And why did Khan put them in there in the first place? Like, oh, these are my treasured family of 72 people. I'm going to put them inside explosives. There's no other place you could have stashed them. Like, it didn't make sense to me. And at first I thought, oh, is Marcus sending the people there to be part of Khan? Like he was using Khan as an army on Kronos to start. Like, no, that wasn't it either. It was very weird. But Spock is right when he tells, Kirk, Harrison deserves a trial, when you call him Harrison at the time, not summary execution. Like, this is very strange. Yeah. There is a whole, he is a according to their understanding at the time, he's a Starfleet officer who's gone rogue. He should be brought back for trial. So he can be interrogated and see who else is in on the plot, not just shoot cruise missiles at him, is the equivalent, into Russia and kill him on the ground there. It just doesn't make sense. And Spock is right. It doesn't make sense.
Not that
it's morally wrong.
Not that would stop the CIA from doing it. It's just
right.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kirk's response is, well, saving you was a violation of regulations and it was morally right, from the volcano. Not exactly the same thing, because, saving you from the volcano violated the Prime Directive, affected this small population on this planet. Starting a war with the Klingons, that's going to cost a lot of lives. That's going to kill a lot more people. It was kind of, his reasoning wasn't great. I like Scotty in this one. Simon Pegg as Scotty has always been fun. Mm-hmm. His refusal to allow the torpedoes on board because he doesn't know what's inside them. It's a little odd, because all you have to do is say, Starfleet, top secret, you're under orders, do it.
Well, he also, I think they try to address that because they've got a complicating factor of something about the torpedoes is interfering with the warp core. And Scotty doesn't know what it is. And he so he tries to explain it to Kirk, and Kirk is giving him the just follow your orders line, and Scotty is actually, I liked this sequence where Scotty is like, you're leaving me no choice, I have to resign, and then he does, and Kirk accepts his resignation, and okay, that was nice. I liked seeing an Enterprise officer a department head disagree with Kirk so much that he was willing to quit. And I thought that was nice drama. I enjoyed that. Some of Simon Pegg as Scotty is fun, but they make him, he's too powerful. They make him able to solve engineering problems like his transwarp equation to beam people onto moving starships at, faster than light speeds across galactic distances. I mean, you just completely undermined Star Trek, which is spaceship based.
Yeah.
If you can transwarp beam onto super fast starships at interstellar distances, you don't need starships anymore.
Right. And beam to Klingon.
And they immediately have to try to walk this back in the next movie. And so that's just a sign of, that was a mistaken plot choice.
Right. What was I going to say about Scotty? Well, in any case, they took the "I'm a miracle worker" thing too far. J.J. Abrams taking it too far. And then Ensign Chekhov, you're now the chief engineer. Was there no one else who works in engineering who could possibly do that job? Like, it just,
I'm a little more qualified than the navigator.
Right.
This is the problem I keep having is it knocks me out of the story because it's not believable. I get you want to have one of your stars, in the midst of that action, but it doesn't make sense. Not to mention, which the complaint I made when we talked about the 2009 Star Trek movie, that the engine room of a starship would look like a chemical manufacturing plant in, Tennessee or something. You know what I mean? It's like,
I think it's actually a brewery.
I did see some of the brewing vats that they're using for the antimatter pods. That's some potent ale. But I just dislike the production design, but that's a whole nother thing that's not really that important. We do have Sulu, who gets to be in command for a little bit, just like we saw in our last discussion of Errand of Mercy, where Sulu got command for the first time. So that was kind of fun. Although not acting captain. You don't get to you don't become acting captain when the captain's off the ship. You become the officer of the con officer of the deck. There's lots of terms, but you don't get an acting captain promotion for that. We do get another reference to some Star Trek lore when they use this ship that they got in the Mud incident last month. So we got a Harry Mudd reference.
Notice that.
And see, I'm trying to think of other. So we have this whole thing with Admiral Marcus, the warmonger, who believes that not only is war with the Klingons inevitable, it's already begun. So essentially a Cold War, and we're just firing the first hot shot, and then we reveal the nemesis because it's a big, black colored battleship, sort of like black colored guns are scarier than Woodstock guns.
I have in my notes, big black Enterprise arrives.
Right, and of course it's bigger. It's got to be bigger, but it uses a smaller crew because.
In fairness to Cold War stuff, I mean, as Admiral RoboCop is not my favorite character by any means, but there is a little bit of real world. I mean, they did try to model, even in the original series, they would try to kind of do a sci-fi version of real stuff. Let That Be Your Last Battlefield was all about racism. And the Enterprise incident was about the Gulf of Tonkin incident in the Vietnam War. Well, you had people who thought we need to go to war with the Soviets right now, like Curtis LeMay, was of that opinion. And so Admiral Marcus, I could see being a kind of 24th century Curtis LeMay.
Although I was thinking this is another bit of, this was another bit of recycling where they were grabbing part of the plot of Undiscovered Country, in that one, because it's similarly, we have rogue Starfleet admirals who want to start a war with the Klingons. In that case, in cooperation with rogue Klingons who also wanted to go to war, which is kind of weird. But it's also a little realpolitik, a little bit of pulling from history. So I get that. But Marcus Khan was found by somebody, we don't know who, and Marcus grabbed him and decided to use him to become a weapons engineer on technology that's hundreds of years in his future. That seemed like a bit of a plot hole right there. Like, why is Khan so good at designing 23rd century weapons technology?
Well, I think the idea was that Khan, even though he's 300 years out of date at this point, he's a real quick learner. And so if you let him read up on what's possible now, he'll think of technical possibilities for new weapons systems that might escape current people because his mind just works that way.
Yeah. I guess we saw that in Space Seed when he read the Enterprise's Wikipedia and learned how to operate it. And then in Wrath of Khan, when he saw the potential of the Genesis device as a weapon. Yeah. So, I can see that, I guess. But then we have what I consider another plot hole, which is Kirk is dead. McCoy, who is brilliantly played by the way, this is my favorite Alt Bones, by the way. He does Keith Urban does a good job.
He's our only Alt Bones at this point, isn't he?
Yeah. Yes. But he's good as Alt Bones is what I should have said.
Yeah, I generally like him as Bones. I hate the way they gave him his nickname. That's ridiculous. But although I did notice there's one line in this where he has a really nice bit where it's in an interaction with Kirk where McCoy keeps using metaphors. And at one point, Kirk calls him on it and says, "Could we stop with the metaphors?" But there's one particular line that I am of two minds about. At one point, McCoy says to Kirk, "Are you out of your corn-fed mind?" And okay, so the standard phrase would be, "Are you out of your cotton-picking mind?" And I'm like, did they change that because they don't want a reference to picking cotton? Or is that political correctness? Or is it a joke on the fact that Kirk is from Iowa, so he'd had a corn-fed mind?
Mhm.
You know, it's like, I'm not sure what to make of that change.
Maybe a little of both.
Yeah.
They took advantage of that. Yeah.
I took it as the Iowa thing. Is the
Yeah.
but
A convenient way to avoid the phrase that's problematic to some people and just do a reference to Kirk's background. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I'm a linguist, and so linguists are non-prescriptive. You let people talk the way they talk, and and cotton picking mind is the established usage.
Yeah.
And it sounds unnatural if you vary from that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the plot hole I was going to mention was the idea that Kirk is dead. McCoy realizes that Khan's blood can resurrect him, save him. And so we must not kill Khan. We must get blood from him.
We need
and then there's 72.
but we can clone as much Khan blood as we need from one cell.
Right. But we've also got 72, other Supermen sitting here next to me in sickbay. Why don't we just pop one of those open and get some blood from them? Like, Khan's not unique in that aspect. It's just kind of, let's not look too closely at this moment in the script. Another issue was the falling from space thing. That's not how orbital mechanics works. We don't turn off the engines and then fall from beyond the orbit of the moon. I mean, did you notice that's where they started? They started this battle with the Nemesis or Vengeance or whatever it is. The Vengeance, I guess it was. A subtle name. They started this battle by the moon and then fall from orbit from the moon to Earth, and just come on. Like, I mean, you could do it in such a way that it works and it doesn't drive people crazy that you've put, but they just don't care. And that's my fundamental problem. Is so often in this movie and in the J.J. Abrams movies in general, it's clear they just don't care to get it right. They're just moving fast and breaking things.
They're also obsessed not just with speed but with scale, as if larger dimensions improves movie making. For example, when Kirk goes into the reactor core, to restart, to do whatever he does that exposes him to radiation, it's huge. It's enormous.
Right.
And I was comparing that to what Spock does in the much smaller reaction chamber in Wrath of Khan. And the more intimate space in Wrath of Khan actually heightens the drama compared to the big, empty, huge space that Kirk is in. And so I have in my notes, bigger is not always better. The intimate version of the warp core, or whatever that room is much more effective in bringing out the intimate inter-character drama with Spock and Kirk and the engineers than this big, vast, empty space that they've given us now. And it just struck me as an illustration of bigger, faster is not better filmmaking.
They have scaled up the Enterprise in this design, and I didn't realize it. And even still, while I was watching this one, I was looking at some stuff online, and this Enterprise is way bigger than the original series Enterprise. It's actually closer to the Galaxy class size, which a lot of people have pointed out, even with 1,000 people on it, would be mostly empty space because it is so massive. So, we have this gigantic ship, and you lose that intimacy that in fact, they had to recreate a small space for Kirk to be laying on the other side of the glass door from Spock. And again, when Spock was dying and Kirk was there in Wrath of Khan, you felt it because they had this history, this connection. I just felt like a lot of the emotion in this one was manufactured because these guys barely knew each other. they barely tolerated each other up to right up through the beginning of this movie. Kirk thought Spock had betrayed him to Pike. He tattled on him. I didn't initially buy the emotion, the connection between them. They hadn't paid for it. It was they tried to glom off of the Kirk Spock that we remember from the Prime universe. So I didn't like it. I remember watching it the first time, and my biggest reaction was, I don't feel anything here. Like in the original Wrath of Khan, I felt that watching it, and I still feel it every time I watch the Wrath of Khan. It still has that impact because these actors, these characters, they're a part of me in a way. But in this, it's just another movie. That hasn't really paid its dues to make me feel something in this scene. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Oh, no, I agreed with that. Yeah.
Father?
Yeah. They're trying to obviously have some parallels to Wrath of Khan, right? So Spock dies in Wrath of Khan. You have Kirk dying here. You have, Kirk yelling Khan, and then you have Spock doing the same thing here. But yeah, the I don't know. Perhaps because we've sort of seen it before, but again, as you say, also because these characters don't have, that long history of that connection the way that Prime Spock and Prime Kirk did at the time of Spock's death in Wrath of Khan. It doesn't click as well in some ways. And I think since we've been down this road so many times in Star Trek, you kind of knew when Kirk dies here, okay, they're going to bring him back to life. Either in this movie, how much time is left, or if not in this movie, then the next one for sure.
Search for Kirk.
There you go. Exactly.
Right.
Another parallel that's in here that I didn't catch the first time I watched it, but I noticed it this time around that in Wrath of Khan, remember there's a scene where Kirk has to go to Spock and basically say, hey, I have to take command from you. I have to command the ship now, and because all this stuff is going on with the Genesis device and whatever else, and Spock is basically like, you assume I have emotion, or you assume I care about this, or I don't have emotions to be heard in this. In this movie, Kirk at one point leaves the bridge and he puts Spock in command, and he does so, and he's saying not just that, hey, I need to leave the bridge, but he's like, you're the better one to command in this particular situation. And so you have, instead of Kirk taking command from Spock, giving it to him in a more active way, I guess.
Right. This is the young Kirk, and this is the moment where they actually do a good job with this. So the young Kirk realizing he's too young, he's too inexperienced, he's too impulsive, and that's been getting them into all this trouble. So Spock would be better in this case. Although it turns out, well, he's not. They actually need Kirk to do the thing that needs to be done anyway. So, but at least there's a little bit of acknowledgement in that moment. But that's a good catch. I like that.
By the way, notice that the big at the climax here, Kirk has to sacrifice himself in order to bring the warp core back online. And if you notice, the very first command that's issued after the warp core comes back online is maximum thrusters.
Not warp.
Really? Your thrusters are powered by your warp engines. That's very interesting.
It's been long established. Thrusters, impulse drive, and warp engines are three separate systems. Yeah. Again, they don't care. It just feels like they don't care. And speaking of big things, we have to crash the big giant ship into the city. Of course, which
that's something else. So the Earth in this, to me, it looks a lot like Coruscant, and it has this very blue-gray visual dynamic that is not Star Trek's native color palette. Even when you go back and watch the original series for star bases, they're very vibrant colors. There's not just this blue-gray washed out, color scheme that's kind of a proxy for black and white, like in Star Wars. Yeah. It just, even visually, it feels like this is more Star Wars than Star Trek.
It's been a trend in a lot of movies and TV to have these washed out blue-gray color palettes.
Mhm.
The Apple TV Plus series Severance that's out now is all this blue-gray, like everything is, it's always takes place, like it's always winter wherever they are in it. And it's always these muted blue-gray colors. And it's like, it's very common in a lot of movies, and especially sci-fi movies, to do these washed out colors.
Well, there have certainly been visual trends before. I mean,
Yeah.
in 80s and 90s Star Trek, especially in Deep Space Nine and Voyager, it's like, could we get some lights on the bridge? It's all dark.
Yeah, the Voyager bridge is pretty dark. So, any other things to say about this one? I mean, Kirk lives, Spock. They capture Khan. They put him in a popsicle. Anything else to say about this one, Father?
One small thing I noted, around 18 minutes into the movie, we see a couple of British Union Jacks flying on the streets of London.
That's
And
interesting.
I thought that was interesting because by this point, Earth is one united government, part of the United Federation of Planets. Presumably there is no British government other than maybe the equivalent of like the local county government or something here, I guess. But the Union Jack is around as maybe it's nostalgic, maybe it's just local pride, maybe, for whatever reason, it's there. And,
Kind of like a Gadsden flag today. It doesn't represent legal territory, but
exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. Like, would a united Earth still have? It would still need local governments. It would still be. So maybe you'd still have some semblance of the nations, but they would act more like local government as opposed to national governments.
Presumably, yeah.
But would you even have the monarchy anymore? That would be interesting. I'd be kind of curious about that. Anything else?
Nothing
Jimmy?
else from me. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay, good. I did promise some feedback, so let me share that with you now. The Sword of Kahless, our episode where the Deep Space Nine episode we just talked about recently. Dave on YouTube writes, this review prompted me to take a bit of a dive into the pronunciation of Kahless. I had an impression or memory that different characters said his name differently. Kahless being the variant. Well, I can't say that I looked up each and every episode where they said his name, but between the three most important, the original series, The Savage Curtain, TNG's Rightful Heir, and DS9's The Sword of Kahless, the pronunciation is the same in each series. Either my mind had me fooled or somewhere a minor character says it differently. Thanks for spurring me to go back and check things out. All right.
Happy to facilitate your obsessions.
That's what we're here for, to help Trekkies with their obsessions.
Always nice to know we aren't the only ones.
Yeah.
Incidentally, Klingon culture is like whatever 1,300 years old since the time of Kahless, or even more, maybe by next gen time. And one of the things about, at least among humans, is there's diversity in pronunciation in languages. That's what an accent is. It's a different pronunciation scheme for the same content. And so even if there's a majority pronunciation of Kahless, it wouldn't bug me if there were minority pronunciations of Kahless representing different groups of Klingon language users that have different accents.
Right.
Sort of like Southern Klingons. And Yankee Klingons.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, Dave, for your feedback. Appreciate that. Now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Stephen F., James B., Helen G., Sarah M., and Margaret B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of Star Trek Into Darkness? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can also watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the TNG episode, Too Short a Season. Until then, Father Jason Tyler, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.